Hey folks, BENTHELOONEY here. I'm a big fan of movies. Friday and Saturday nights are times to binge watch as many movies as I can. Check out my top 50 favorite films video on this channel to get an idea of what kind of movies I love. That being said, I don't enjoy every movie I watch. When you're a movie fan like I am, you take the risk of stumbling upon movies that you have hopes for, but are ended up disappointed by. Or you run into movies that you don't think will be good, but end up surprising you. This video is about the former. I watch a lot of movies with my best friend, and bless his heart, he's tried to get me to see one of his favorite directors in a positive light. No matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't get me into Christopher Nolan. Huh? Christopher Nolan? But he's one of the most critically acclaimed and beloved directors right now. All his movies have been box office successes, with some being huge moneymakers. He's able to make summer blockbusters with intelligence and emotion that not a lot of other blockbusters can do. So what's not to love? I've done some research and it turns out I'm not the only one who thinks this way. There are some fans that don't get Nolan's movies either, but they appear to be in the minority. And when you're in the minority, I must ask, is Christopher Nolan overrated? Seems like a fair question to ask. But why would I ask such a thing? Well, let me explain why I feel this way. For those of you unaware, Christopher Nolan is a film director whose list of films are as follows: Following, Memento, Insomnia, Batman Begins, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, and Interstellar. I've had the pleasure of watching all these movies, minus Following, so I'm more than familiar with Nolan-style filmmaking that I'm going to use to base my opinions on. I was inspired to make this video after my aforementioned best friend was so kind to show me IMDb's top 250 movies list. On this list, The Dark Knight is number 4. Number 4. It's above such beloved movies as 12 Angry Men, Schindler's List, Pulp Fiction, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the original Star Wars trilogy, Forrest Gump, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. If that's not enough for you, of the 9 films Nolan has directed so far, only Insomnia and Following are not on the list. Comparing other directors that have directed equal or more films than Nolan include Quentin Tarantino, who has 5 films on the list, Steven Spielberg has 3, Alfred Hitchcock has 6, and Hayao Miyazaki, my favorite director of all time, has 5. Adding insult to injury, fans of his films are already saying that his film Dunkirk is a masterpiece. Can we at least wait for the movie to come out before we praise it to high heaven? So yeah, Nolan has his fanbase. A fanbase so dedicated that they voted most of his filmography into a list of the most loved films. This is also the same fanbase that threatened physical violence against reviewers who had the gall to give a negative review to The Dark Knight Rises, but I'm sure whoever did that doesn't represent the majority of Nolan's fans. I know, seems kinda weird to bring up Nolan's fans in this kind of video, but I think the constant praise and overexposure of Nolan's films might have been what killed them for me. When it comes to dealing with media that's constantly being praised, I get preconceived notions in my head that when I get around to watching them, I'm going to see something spectacular, but I end up setting myself up for disappointment. Some people might ask, why can't you just go in with a blank mind? See, going in with a blank mind means scrolling to the video store and picking up a movie you've never heard of before. Without any knowledge or research on it, you don't know what to expect. You also don't have any outside opinion to affect your way of thinking. You take the movie home and you watch it for yourself to find out if it's a movie that's obscure for a reason, or if it's a great film that just got overshadowed and was waiting to be rediscovered. I can't go into a Nolan movie with a blank mind if he's a guy that directed a movie that's more loved than many of my favorite movies. It can't be done. I'm not a robot. I can't just reset my memory and forget that I've heard all I've heard about Nolan's movies. It can't be done. That being said, I went to several other forms of media knowing they were great. Films like Gone with the Wind, Die Hard, and It's a Wonderful Life, and even book series like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson I got into much later than everybody else, and they became some of my favorite things ever. So, how come it works for those and not for Nolan's movies? I'm not saying Nolan is a bad director, far from it. If anything, he's one of the few good directors we have nowadays. He always puts time and care into his movies. He's able to get those grand scope movies that deal with the inner workings of the brain and express how characters are feeling. I'm complimenting him, so why don't I like his movies? I guess it all comes down to how he tells his stories. He's known for his complex plots and his drawn-out dialogue scenes between his characters. However, in the long run, that's what prevents me from getting too deep into his movies. His films just have an overall pretentious feeling to them. Is a movie automatically a masterpiece simply because it's complex and has a lot of twists and turns in it? One should never try to be different for the sake of being different. Understand the rules before you break them. Nolan's movies do their best to have deep themes and offer something new to stories we've seen plenty of times before, but they ultimately get caught up in how smart and groundbreaking they're trying to be. His movies give off the feeling like Nolan's trying to win an Oscar. I'm not saying creators shouldn't set goals for themselves in order to drive their creativity, but when you get too wrapped up in trying to make a movie that's going to please movie snobs, your work ends up becoming too good for its own good. I believe an artist should make his work to please himself first and his audience second. Generally, when you make work that you like yourself, you attract more people who share your interests and gravitate towards your work. Even though Nolan has plenty of his fans, this is just me trying to explain what kills Nolan's movies for me the best I can. Mentioning my point above, with Nolan trying hard to make his movies feel complex and deep, he doesn't really show he knows how to express his ideas visually. So he puts that responsibility on his characters. This causes his movies to have gallons of exposition. This would work well in book form, but Nolan is a director, not an author. These drawn-out dialogue scenes cause his movies to slow down drastically to me. I know I should be fascinated by these ideas he's presenting me, but good ideas only remain good ideas until you can execute them properly. I don't think having these characters explain these ideas to me is very fascinating. If anything, it breaks the fantasy and magic of what films are. Part of the fun of films is not explaining everything. Movies that are loved and talked about are so because they leave little details but allow us audience members to put the pieces together. Would Pulp Fiction be half as good if we knew what was in the briefcase? Would the Blair Witch Project have been as scary if there was a Blair Witch or not? Would Mad Max Fury Road have been praised as it was if an hour of the movie was dedicated to the characters explaining how the world ended up the way it was? Films are a visual medium. Show, don't tell. Nolan's movies do their fair share of both, but the telling really takes away from the awe of the showing. You can argue Nolan's movies are so complex that they need to be explained in order to be understood. Fine. But think of it this way. If one of Nolan's charms is putting realistic twists on complex ideas, why do his characters not talk like humans? Whenever a Nolan character talks, there's something unnatural about how they do so. Since they have a lot of exposition to explain, they come off more as college professors than they do human beings. Yes, I know college professors are human beings, but that's besides the point. I find it hard to get attached to these characters when they talk to me like they're trying to give me a science lesson. Hey, I put this movie on to watch you shoot things, not lecture me about how dreams work. Nolan seems more focused on trying to show off how smart he can be than focusing on just making fun movies that entertain people. Now, I'm not going to say people don't see his movies, but at what cost? Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just have a hard time understanding all these details Nolan has thrown at me. But at the same time, whether or not Nolan's movies are too dialogue heavy or not, would I be able to still enjoy these movies overall? Well, I think now would be a good time to give my opinions on every Nolan movie, excluding Following, as I haven't seen it. Insomnia. Jeez, this one was a snore fest. I practically shut my brain off after the first half hour. I had no idea what was going on or what the plot was about. Before you Nolan fans pound those keyboards calling me a moron with a short attention span, I sat through Seven Samurai from start to finish without being bored, and that movie's over 3 hours long. A movie causes me boredom when it doesn't appeal to me personally, and this movie was one of them. I did think Robin Williams gave a great performance though. He truly had talent that deserves to be recognized, and this definitely was one of his best performances. I feel bad I didn't like the movie that had such a great performance in it, but it is what it is. The Dark Knight trilogy. I know, I made a video about these movies a few years ago. I was really angry back then, wasn't I? Well, now here's a less cringy version of my thoughts. My problem with these movies is the same problem I have with all of Nolan's movies. While I'm a big Batman fan, I didn't get the Batman vibe from these movies. When I think of Batman, I think of detective stories, film noir, dark and gothic atmosphere, and deep complex characters. You can say this trilogy had the dark and complex characters, but it took away everything else I love about the Batman universe and replaced them with action. That's what these movies felt like. Action movies. The action scenes in them were quite impressive, not going to lie, but I just don't care about all this deep stuff. Say what you want about Tim Burton's Batman movies, at least his characters knew when to shut the hell up. And before you say I don't like Nolan's movies because I don't like change, keep in mind I grew up with the 60s Batman show before I saw Burton's movies. Wrap your head around that. I like a 60s Batman sitcom more than Nolan's Batman movies. Screw me, right? The Prestige. This was another boring one. I thought the idea of two musicians in a competition with each other was interesting, but all the freaking dialogue ruined it once again. Does no one let anyone edit his scripts? Anyone? I'm all for letting creators have freedom, but sometimes fresh eyes are needed to look over a story and trim it down. That's what they teach you in every writing class. If you can explain your ideas in as few sentences as possible, do so. But I'm getting off topic. The ending of this movie was also great, but not worth saying through 2 hours of talking for. Inception. This is one of the few Nolan's movies I watched more than once. The first time, I was bored and I had no idea what was going on. The second time, I knew what was going on, but I was still bored. The ideas of dreams within dreams was fascinating. I love stories about dreams. You can do so much with them. But this movie was still boring, and I'm so frustrated because of it. I wanted to love this so bad, but I ended up just being disappointed. The action scenes were fun, though. Again, not worth sitting through a 2.5-hour movie for, especially when most of them are done using computer effects, and I get more enjoyment out of watching Jackie Chan risking his own life for the sake of a stunt, but I digress. Interstellar. Is Nolan trying to set the record with the most consecutive boring movies in a row? Joking aside, remember those documentaries on space your teacher forced you to watch in science class? Imagine a 3-hour movie like that. That might be a little unfair, but that's what this movie felt like. I'd like to say that there was something worth salvaging from this movie, but I can't think of much. The idea in this movie is that you can travel through space and you can see the past and it affects the past. What? I'm probably butchering the plot detail, but I can't help it. This movie was boring. I guess I kind of liked the relationship between Matthew McConaughey and his daughter. Kind of. But all the science battle and dialogue caused my mind to wander. I guess it also doesn't help the fact that I'm very picky with science fiction. I can't stand science babble. I'm a redneck from Central Illinois. I'm too stupid for all this science crap. Interstellar just felt like Nolan's attempt to make the next 2001: A Space Odyssey. He even has scenes that pay tribute to that movie. Well, I'm better off just watching 2001. There they are, my opinions on most of Nolan's movies. Oh wait, I forgot one. One that I actually liked. No, not liked some things about it, I liked the whole thing. Memento. Okay, now this is more like it. This was a movie that didn't constantly beat you up with all these ideas and complex feelings. It had a story to tell and it told it. It was a movie that constantly kept me guessing, and not only was I able to pay attention to it from start to finish, I was actually wrapped up in it and found myself enjoying it. It was a generally great movie. Not one I would put on my favorites list, but for a Nolan movie, it was a masterpiece. What was it about this movie that was different from all the other Nolan movies I've seen? This movie was independent. Nolan didn't have the big budget he has now, so he had to be creative to make this movie entertaining. This was a movie where his style worked best because its low-budget nature helped to enhance the story he was telling. He wasn't tempted by special effects or big-name actors. He came up with a story that worked on a small scale but made a big impact. Nolan's style works best for small-scale independent movies. Being in Hollywood has caused him to be a part of their system, while still wanting to tell his complex stories. So now he's caught in a tug-of-war to where he doesn't know if he wants to be a blockbuster director or the independent filmmaker with great ideas. That sums up Nolan for me. He has all these complex and interesting ideas, but to me, they just don't make for entertaining movies. Nolan is a talented director, and I'm glad there's one out there who's trying to inspire audience members to think. But to me, they get too focused on being complex and interesting, and they forget they're supposed to be entertainment movies. But hey, that's just my opinion. Well, that about wraps it up. What are your folks' opinions on Nolan and his movies? If you don't know who he is, are there any movies you don't like that everybody else does? Let me know in the comments below. Until next week, take it easy, fam. And when you're in the minority, I must ask, dag frickin' nabbit!